I am just going to talk through some of these themes with you guys. Alright, so first, I don't know if you noticed, there are quite a few metaphors happening during the plot of this episode. So first is twit or twitcher is meant to refer to Twitter, tweets, twits. I know that there's now Twitch out, but this is pretty old, so it does not refer to that medium. The most obvious is the iPhone and the iPhone. The iPhone, of course, in reality is spelled with a lowercase I, Phone-E. I'll put it up on the screen for you. And the make-believe one, the one in Futurama, is EYE, capital Phone-E. Be sure if you write about this one that you are creating the differentiation between talking about the cartoon and talking about reality. Make sure your spelling changes with those. So that also means that mom is Apple. In this case, she usually represents the big corporations that do evil things. That's why she's the evil overlord type of female. Alright, then there's Mr. Chunks, the goat with the two heads that was spewing the different stuff in the hot tub. Yeah. He is a representation of consumption and poorly made junk in the cycle that is created when we buy junk, or even have what is called planned obsolescence, which is something the Apple and the iPhones and the iPads, etc. do, and we will talk about that here in a little bit, but there's a metaphor there as well. There's also a fun metaphor between the, what did they call it? Chromium can be smelted down to make artificial sweetener, and rat poison, which is actually a reference to aspartame, which can be used for both of those things. Aspartame is sweetened though, and most diet drinks that don't say otherwise use aspartame, and this is a cancer-causing, ridiculously deadly type of chemical. So the more you drink of it, the more your body holds on to, and it slowly poisons you. It causes things like MS-like symptoms, and people who go to the hospital realize that it is the artificial sugar when they're not allowed to drink diet soda anymore, and that's one of the reasons they found the links to this. They also have been aware of this link since the 60s, but nothing's really changed about it other than public knowledge and their demand to make products be made with things like Splenda, etc. So another metaphor, aspartame and chromium. Okay, so let's start with the idea of the third world versus the first world, since this is something that's going to be present in one of the other options that we're talking about of these 4 paper choices that you have. Did you notice the literal garbage ring around the planet? This is, of course, a sign of pollution. Not only is it a sign of pollution, but it's a sign that it's spreading because it's going outer space, trying to create that imagery that the pollution that happens in places like the third world is not separate from the rest of us. It is going to very clearly link, everything is linked together in our world. Like if you do this in the air, you're going to actually feel it because it is a fluid. It's not a liquid, but it is a fluid because you can feel it. We live within it. It's our oxygen, but it is a fluid, and that means that anything that's polluted in the air is eventually going to reach across the planet because of the way the air currents work. The same is true with water. Yes, it does get filtered through the land a little bit, but even the land gets contaminated. The more water gets contaminated, the more that spreads, and that's why we have the great garbage patches in the ocean. It is very connected, and that's why the ring is supposed to represent that. Because it's also maintaining or reestablishing that idea of how we believe, or the warrant that we believe that the third world is literally separate from us. They make it a separate planet in the episode, and that is to represent most people's thoughts about the third world as being very separate from us. Oh, they don't affect us at all. But yeah, they do. We affect each other quite a bit. This is one planet, and it is very, very small when you think about it. And one of the interesting things about that, talking about air pollution, is what is the first thing that happens when they hit the ground? Well, first you notice how polluted it is in the place. The ground is all garbage, the air is filled with smog, and they burn the garbage and call it processing. Now this is how most recyclables and stuff like that is processed. How garbage are processed. How tires are processed. You know that they just burn tires? That recycling paper actually wastes water because it takes water to actually create paper. Let's go on. But they say that it's processing because it's a better name. It's equivocation, using a word in 2 different ways. So they break down the garbage to gain every bit that's valuable. That's why all the kids are there to find the shiny. And of course, kids do most of the work. That's a big hint towards child slave labor, and they do actually, India specifically is one of the biggest sections of the child slave labor where they process our electronic garbage, or our recycling. in which they are digging through all of this toxic waste and chemicals and stuff and the batteries and whatnot in order to get to the valuable parts, the valuable metals to be recycled, and the rest of it just pollutes the ground, pollutes them, and they get cancer and all these other respiratory issues. And this is a great source for connection for this if you write about this paper, is the type of impact that recycling electronics actually has on the planet, and why we should probably not just throw them away all willy-nilly, but make them last, which they could last a whole lot longer if people weren't greedy. But also notice that the citizens of the third world country, the third world planet, speak better English than the native speakers. And this is interesting because, as we talked about early in the semester, something that often happens is people immigrate and end up speaking the language so much better because they had to study so much harder in order to fit in order to gain our citizenship to begin with. And that happens quite a bit. A lot of other countries are more highly educated than we are. A lot of the Middle Eastern people have 3, 4, or 5 degrees, speak 7 languages, and are considered bumpkins or uneducated and all these other things because they look different or they believe something different and all that other stuff. And this is kind of hitting on that note that, hey, just because they do these jobs, because they don't have another option, because corporations have come into their country or other governments have come into their country and made it so they have no opportunities because they bombed universities and all of these other things, which, by the way, happened during the Cold War. We fought the Cold War in Afghanistan. If you didn't know, Russia and us both fought there, and we made promises that we didn't keep, hence why we had to go back and have our own war, because it's just one of those connections that's very clear to me that might not be clear to you, that people of the third world are very educated, more so than we like to think, because they used to have the institutions and whatnot when we had like the 60s and the 70s, and they were able to gain freedoms before the Taliban and whatnot came in and bombs were destroyed after the Cold War, when we kind of ruined parts of their country to fight our own war. That had nothing to do with them. They were just in the middle of it. Anyways, I could rant way too much about that, so I'm going to move on. They are also far more efficient than the first world because they get paid so little that the more that they can gain out of each product, the better off they are, the more likely they're going to keep employment. How did you feel about the depiction of the wildlife? Now, there are some hints here, like the skeletal bird when it goes through the smog and the dog's tail falls off, and these are showing the effects of the ecosystem and what happens when we pollute it, that it hurts our fish, that it hurts our birds, that it hurts our animal life, it hurts our trees, it hurts us, but we don't think about those things. We just want our products and we want the newest, brightest thing, and that's, again, showing the effects of that before we see the cause of it. Let's talk a little bit in this regard about environmental ignorance, because that's exactly where this is leading, right? So notice the mayor was saying things like, welcome to the 83rd or 34th annual e-waste festival. He doesn't even know what year it is because he doesn't give a shit. And that's reflective of the government doing this just to put on a face, or corporations doing things just to put on a face. We make these big festivals for everybody to participate in, but often they have far more waste and trash than would have been if we had just gone and done this on our daily thing. Like, we made initiatives to do this, rewarded people for doing these every day in our home, and creating habits of our society. But making a big party about it and getting press, they obviously don't really care. Also notice Professor Farnsworth, who's the old man, and how he has a box of devices, and he says how these doomsday devices are dangerously unstable, alpha better not knowing where they are. And it is so true. That is, again, why the third world was depicted the way it was. It's because we'd rather just shove it off on them and not think about it, not want to know what happens to our stuff, because it's pretty awful, and ignorance is bliss. We would rather not know where our dangerous stuff goes. Do you know what happens to your batteries? Do you know you're not supposed to just throw them in the garbage because they leak and they contaminate? Think about how you dispose of your pills. Most people flush them down the toilet. Did you know that contaminates our water? That can't get filtered out. What you're supposed to do is bring those back to the pharmacist when they've expired or you don't use them anymore, so they can dispose of them properly. But we don't do this. We're ignorant. Warrant here, by the way. Warrant and all those examples I gave you are backing. The warrant is we're ignorant of our environment and our effect on it. And the backing is examples of what we do wrong. We don't know the effects of recycling. We don't know the effects of overconsumption and just being a throwaway culture. We don't know, and we don't care because we don't want to think about it. Because if we thought about it, we'd have to change our behavior. Oh, and one of my favorites is the politician says, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's not dangerous after it's hauled off to the third world because they're the ones that take care of it." Again, linking back to how we don't understand how this hurts all of us and how connected we are. The last thing in the environmental ignorance is Leela, the purple-haired woman with the one eye, says that this is the worst thing she's ever seen when she sees the kids in the recycling and whatnot. And then, of course, they whip him and the dog and all of those other things. And this is our ignorance of the practices of what actually happens. Of course, when they get back, he says, "Oh, well, we learned some positives about recycling too." Obviously, there are positives about recycling. That's why we have the motto, reduce, reuse, recycle. It's part of the things that we should be doing. But why not actually show us those things? Well, there's your rebuttal, or one of your rebuttals, would be what the positives are of recycling these things and how this helps people and the planet and reduces our imprint or our effect on it. But we're showing all the bad things because they're trying to make a point. They're trying to, once again, make us feel foolish and be critical about the way we behave, because once we know what the effect of all this stuff is, we might curb other behaviors to prevent this. So, let's talk about conformity and consumerism, our next theme. So there is this constant consumerism, and this creates a throwaway culture. We wait online for hours or days for the newest version of something, and as Fry says, are turned into mindless zombies. He's even told at the beginning, when he questions his consumption and his having to wait in line for so long for something that may or may not be cool, he's told to stop thinking. Don't think. Just get in line and buy because everybody wants it. Obviously, if everybody wants it, it must be fantastic. And if you know anything about popular opinion, it's not usually the best. It's usually sparked somewhere and created hype. And it might be a good thing, but not always. I would say about 50% of the time or less. But that's because people see the sleek, new and shiny, and we have what's called FOMO. We don't want to miss out. We want to take part in this new trend. We want to feel like we're cool and we're included. And so we go out and we spend enormous amounts of money. We wait online for long hours for something we don't know much about, or at least at the time that is true. It's still kind of true now. But this is referencing, by the way, the first iPhone. And the first iPhone we had created such a ruckus that people did wait in line for days outside of stores to get their hands on this, and they sold out on the first day. And then there was this big hoopla about when were they going to get new ones, and then there was a second wave of people. But if you were part of that first group, they got that first iPhone before they sold out. Holy crap, you were one of the in crowd. And that's just what it was. And that's exactly what they're referring to with the long lines and the constant consumerism type of connection that we're showing. They also mentioned this obscure underground music when they walked in, and Amy was like, "Oh, this is by the way, obscure means not well known music that she's been hearing everywhere." Marketing scheme, right? Creates this kind of mood. They also use sales tactics. So there's one of the marketing techniques, which again references back to the ad analysis that we did. That's why we did that paper first, so you could get things for this one. They also use the tactic of these are in short supply. And when we saw the back of the room after Mom said, make sure you get your hands on one, they're in short supply, we saw thousands of these things being produced, and that was definitely a tactic that they used. They had plenty iPhones made, but they only gave certain stock out to stores to create this hype, and then they create this kind of FOMO and create this backlash of demand so that they could sell their supply more completely and make more profits. There's also false need present here because of the trendiness, and also the way she's talking about and the way they're creating this, you won't be cool unless you have the phone. But this also makes sure that the problems don't matter, because there's this list of problems that it has. Won't hold a battery, you don't have a choice of carrier. She's even suing different app companies, so you have limited apps other than the ones that she's approved, but none of that matters. Plus the fact that it's $500. I know the new ones are like $1,000 or more, but at the time that was a really expensive phone. I think the other most expensive phone I had before that was like maybe $100. And this is jumps in technology and all that other stuff, but The problems that it had, the first one, didn't matter because of the false need to get one, to be part of the in crowd. Also notice that because of the trendiness of this, everybody began to think that they were an internet geek. That was one of the things that the people in the high-rise said. Us internet geeks have something new to the new trends. And that's part of consumerism too, is how quickly trends shift and change. It's just enough that everybody gets one and it's saturated and there's something new to get. And that's how they keep getting money out of us, is that wanting to conform. And of course, conformity is painful. Not only does it hurt our wallet, not only are we not getting a great product, but think about the way it was installed. Put in his eye and in his ear, he screamed. It was literally painful. And this might hurt our wallets. It might hurt us physically. Like, what's one of the problems that we saw featured of this phone being in front of their face the whole time? Leela crashing her spaceship. Well, that's equivalent to texting and driving, people crashing their cars. It's actually painful. It could kill you because of our addiction to a product like this, because our need to be connected all the time. And that's part of what they're getting at. What happened because of the iPhone? These things happen because of the iPhone. Okay. It also talks about twits, or aka people who are swept up in trends or maybe not as intelligent as everybody else, will fall for these marketing tactics easily. And it's even funnier when it's amplified by Fry, when he's like, I'm sick of my head doing things, because what happens with your phone all the time? Bing, ping, ping, ping. Makes your brain react, creates an addiction to your phone, all of those alerts and everything else. And so that's part of that consumption, part of that conformity, is that it's created to make you rely on it, to make you think that you need it. The phone creates the apocalypse, which is pretty funny. We see the 2.0, the need for the new version, the consumerism, the conformity again, and everybody having the money hanging out, marching towards it for Apple iPhone 2.0. Fry and Leela are just sitting there, hugging each other, ignoring the fact the pretty much zombie apocalypse is happening in their city. And this is something that is also interesting about the phone. Although these two don't have the phone up at the moment, their interaction is caused by a lot of what happens with the phone, and the phone creates the zombie, but they're still oblivious to it because they're so consumed in their own things, which happens both on the phone and without. But that's a consumeristic tendency, as we saw in the documentary, that it's about you, an army of one. It's about us. It makes us self-consumed. That's what advertising and marketing does. So let's talk a little bit about advertising and culture, since we're on that type of thing. Not only does it show the problems with it, as we said, battery doesn't hold a charge, etc. Corporates sell crap to be trendy. And they do this by buying reviews sometimes, or giving out products to influencers to get good reviews and get their followers to do as they say. One of the funny things about this is mom quotes unbiasedreviews.mom. Not .com, .mom, which indicates that she owns that review site. It likely is biased because, I mean, they're kind of hitting the nail on the head, aren't they? Unbiased reviews. .mom. And a lot of the time in reality, people pay for researched and skewed perspectives. Once again, back to the aspartame thing. The reason it's not such well known is because people paid for that shit to go away. People pay for the research or eliminate or have researchers ignore certain aspects of an experiment in order to get their drug sold, or to say that this is safe or this is safe, so that people will consume it, and then they'll just pay the damages afterwards because they'll make more profits than they'll have to pay fees or any lawsuits blow into. And that's what a lot of prescription companies do, by the way. But the skewing is so that they can advertise something in that culture that we're made to believe that advertisements tell us the truth. And they don't. Because we believe that they're not allowed to lie. It's false advertising, therefore we can sue. Well, they have to tell you certain parts of the truth in order for that to be true. And that's how they get us. They infiltrate our culture so much that a lot of the times we believe that articles, which are ads, are actually teaching us something. One of the other ways that is interesting, we talked about how do advertisers know what demographics you're in, how do they know what you're interested in, and once again, your phone. We talked about this too, how it tracks everything that you click on it, that you search. Google and iPhone and Amazon, all of them do this stuff. And that's the direct marketing scheme, the caustic underarm fungus that can be charged to your iPhone for additional fee. They're very clearly able to directly market to you because they're always listening. And then, of course, Mom's evil plan is to infect everybody with her twitworm so that they will all come back to buy 2.0. So they make you addicted to it enough, but have enough problems so that when the new one comes out, they're slightly different than the ones before it. Just enough of it has been improved for you to want the new one without being upset that you have to shell out another $7, $9, $1,200 on a new phone after a year of you having the previous one. I've never bought myself an iPhone, so yeah. And the other funny thing about her marketing herself is that she comes off as this harmless, loving grandmother, but in reality, she is this cold, evil villain. It's great marketing on her part for trying to create her image, which is what sells her products. So let's talk about technology, or a technological society and reality TV. Bender is once again a metaphor. He is rude. And he is a metaphor for technology, or technologically centered personality. So people who are so consumed with their life on their phones or online that the real world doesn't really matter. Real people's opinions, real people's feelings don't matter, because all that matters is people liking them, paying them attention, sharing their things. And that's very evident with Bender. So much so that think about the types of things that he posts about people. He shows Fry fighting doing karate in his underwear and getting hit and knocked down. About Amy dressing up in a bikini to do something that was supposed to be educational that Fry tried and was unsuccessful because there was no nudity in it. Or how the professor was putting mementos in Surge, which was an old soda. You missed out because I know it's not the same as it used to be. And it's setting him on fire. These are all things where people are getting hurt or exploited. But think about the things that we like to watch. Jackass, Steve-O, America's Got Talent, where people are doing crazy, ridiculous things, where people are making fun of themselves, or embarrassing themselves, pimple popping videos. I mean, we watch some really crazy shit. And that is why Bender appeals to people, but that's also the reason why, because that appeals to people. Bender keeps having a self-centered attitude and focusing on his online persona because it's much more fulfilling than real life is. And we like to make ourselves more significant online. Think about the person who's interviewing the mayor at the festival. He was an online podcast comment editor. Insignificant job or role seems important when you phrase it a certain way, and it's not. But we like to make ourselves seem so much more important. That's what copy editing does, or copywriting does, aka marketing ourselves. One of the things that Leela said when she came back from the recycling thing was that we should use our technology as long as possible. It is hard to grasp a throwaway societies, aka their phones, the TV, and the remote. Let's throw away the TV, the remote's getting low. How they all had these really old phones and are made to seem so super old when really a couple years is not really that long to have a phone. We should keep them for much, much longer. The old phone that we had on our wall lasted for decades. Why can't one that we carry around last for at least a decade? I mean, it should. They have the technology already figured out for the next 20 years, but they're slowly trickling it out to us so that we can continue to consume, we continue to spend our money. Now, one of the things that links with this is something I mentioned before, which is the 3 R's. Once again, reduce, reuse, recycle. And it's in that order for a reason. First, we reduce our consumption, because the less that we consume, the less that we interrupt the world, that we take from it, the more that there is for the future, etc., the less of an impact we have on the planet. 2, we reuse things. When your sock gets a hole in it, people used to mend those things. We used to reuse containers that we got from, like the margarine containers. We'd reuse that for all sorts of things. I had a whole bowl set of frickin' Country Crock containers. When we go to Taco Bell and get those giant plastic cups, we reuse those as cup. I remember having a giant glass of orange juice, which I later puked up because I had mono, but we got that cup from Taco Bell. And these are things that we should be doing. We should be fixing things and reusing them and repurposing them for other things instead of just throwing them away. And when we can't find another use for them because they are just so used, that's when we're supposed to recycle them. Not the first step. That's usually people's first step. That is not the first step. The first step is to reduce, then to reuse, then recycle. Because as we saw, recycling has negative effects on the environment too, just like making new products does. So the consumption, once again, is what they're hammering at, is part of the problem, is how infiltrated consumption is in our culture. We just want things and want things and want things. And it's very evident right now, so a lot of people are buying things to make themselves feel better, because the world is in a tailspin. And we feel better when we have new shiny things that can distract us, but they only last for a little while, which creates that consumption again, because life is not easy. Products make it seem like life can be easier, and it's not. It's just a shiny new toy to distract us from what's going on. Reality TV. First indication of reality TV happens with Real Housewives of Sin city, which is of course referencing the Real Housewives of various cities that they've had series of, but it's about this fake drama because reality TV is not real. They create fake drama to boost ratings, and that is exactly what they were doing here. She needs to reset. I'll tell her to her face. Duh, and when she figures out she needs a reset, she'll reset. She's probably not that right now. So one of the things they're also getting at here is that because of technology like the iPhone, the traditional media is dead. Is this true? Kind of. We still have print papers. There's plenty of people who still prefer print, yes. Having electronic papers and books and magazines and whatnot do help our environment. Some people prefer to have the real media. With Hulu and Netflix and all the other streaming sites and YouTube and whatnot, it seems like traditional TV is dead, but traditional TV is making a comeback now that everybody's all separated out again. They're like, screw this, we just rather have one site, which went from, TV with commercials to Hulu, Netflix, and now it's all these other streaming sites, and it's going to swing back the other way, back to one that has everything that you pay for what you want, like Hulu does, which is pretty much the same as having traditional TV. You pay for the option with the commercials or without the commercials. You pay a little bit more not to have those commercials because the commercials are what pay for TV shows. One of the reasons why non-traditional media is making such an impact is one, because a lot of the time it's very short and our attention spans have kind of dwindled because of technology, which we talked about before. But it's also these fast micro events that we can get hooked on and we can share, and then we can be on to the next thing really quickly, and we like that type of thing. We like to be constantly entertained and constantly thinking about new things. And that's how things like the old Vines used to work, or how Twitch works now, Snapchat, and all of these other things. I know I'm not hip and into all of the stuff. I probably don't know half the things. If you want to leave some of the things that you think of while I'm talking about this in the comments, please do help make connections for other people and start conversations down there. But we had those mashups that Bender, including himself, in the middle of the scene, and we can now cut scenes and do all these types of things with technology to make interesting content for people. And because of this, people do some really crazy things. There used to be a phrase, do it for the Vines, do it for Instagram, do it for the Snapchat, do it for whatever, and people have literally broken bones, have died trying to do these stunts to get likes and to get internet famous for their 15 minutes of fame before it fades on to somebody else, which is exactly what happens to Leela. She didn't want the fame, but she got it, and then the next day it was on somebody else. And that's how quickly those trends work. Sometimes not even a day. Sometimes it's just like, oh, and then something bigger happened because people are constantly trying to one-up themselves. And I consistently think of the Cash Me Outside girl when I think of this, and her peeing on the sidewalk while she's rapping. And this girl is on tour and makes millions of dollars. I don't get it, guys. I don't get it. The phrase, did you know that these phones, or these iPhones, are phones too? What are smartphones primarily used for? Texting, social media, recording videos, FaceTime, not actually phone calls, although some people still do phone calls. Most of the time we're doing other things, internet things, on our phones because we can, because it's a portable little computer now that we don't have to be plugged into a wall, and it's convenient. So how does this change the way we communicate? Well, we communicate a lot less face to face. I mean, thankfully, this is available for us to still continue class, but overall, a lot of the times we would rather do this than actually have a conversation with somebody in real life and make eye contact and shake hands and understand the actual etiquette of communicating with somebody one-on-one, which is something that we're greatly losing in this country, in other countries of course, but each time technology becomes more and more prominent, the less we are able to communicate effectively, to communicate in a way that connects with each other in a meaningful way, and we lose something of our connectiveness, our ability to look after each other, because we have literal screens blocking us away from each other. We have those little screens, and that's why they literally put a screen right in front of their faces to signify when the phone is on, because that's what we do with our phones. We're blocking other people's ability to communicate with us. What did we used to do when we had to wait at the DMV or tag agency down here? We used to talk to each other. We used to read a book, and now we're just on our phones all the time. And it also makes us feel like we can multitask all the time, and this is not true. You can only literally do one thing at a time. But we like to think that we can, and it's dangerous. That's, again, the texting and driving references that we have. One of the other things about having technology with us all the time is a lack of privacy. The phone automatically records everything, and the phone does automatically record everything. Even if it's not downloaded to your phone or your iPad or your computer, it's always on. People can always see it unless you cover that shit. We've talked about this a little bit before. But, shit, what was I saying? Oh, privacy. Bender was talking about, since when was the internet about robbing people of their privacy? And Bender said, or Fry said that, and Bender says August 6, 1991. Well, that is the date that the internet went public. Available for all of us schmo. Not that many of us had computers at the time. That's when the internet happened. And it's never been about protecting our privacy, ever. It's been about sharing our information with each other. And we had to kind of learn about how to protect ourselves and our privacy as we went, because it was so radically new to be able to connect with people in this way. It's ridiculous. When I was young, I never imagined we could be doing this right now. Never, ever, ever, ever. So, the funny thing about losing privacy and these trends and how that links together in this story is, does anybody actually give a shit about our deepest, darkest secrets? No. For most of us, no. Unless you murdered somebody, then somebody cares. But Leela's butt boil, after a day and everybody knew, one, they revered her for it, and then nobody cared. And that was her deepest, darkest secret. And that's the thing about trends and 15 Minutes of Fame and all this other stuff, is that things that we think are so terrible that it debilitates us aren't really all that bad. People don't care because we all have them. So why are we all going to judge each other on these things that we all have? We all have things that embarrass us. So back to this idea of trends and the new way technology kind of advances this, along with reality TV and the types of things that we like to be entertained with. See, reality TV and social media makes us competitive, and we're always trying to outdo each other. Again, do it for the Vine, do it for the Instagram, do it for the Snapchat, etc. And this is why we have those nudity and the titillating twits. This is why Leela says stop acting like the Queen of England to Fry. The thing about this is that Fry made the bet that he could beat Bender without sinking to his level, and he fails because he does. He exploits Leela in order to gain followers. And that's what people do, is they sell other people out. Scuzzballs, once again, I talked about Steve-O and Jackass, and they used to hurt each other and their family members. I mean, they literally had to put warnings, don't do this at home, because people are emulating so much. They became so famous with all of this ridiculous competitive, nobody's ever done this before shit. And prank videos of prank trends, and how people are trying to go viral with licking public toilet seats or products or coughing on people like they're doing right now in order to get a little bit of fame during a terrible time. Like, people do this consistently. They need attention. They are the center of their own universe. But we find it entertaining just the same. We all talk about it. And with that 5 Minutes of Fame, I don't know if you noticed the connection of her butt Boyle being named Susan in the way she sings. I'll put a link in the description box below. But Susan Boyle is a singer that was found on Britain's Got Talent, I think. Britain's Got Talent. And because of the way she looked and the way she talked when she went up, she was made fun of, and then they found out she could sing. And that's kind of the example, or the backing to that warrant of people, one, prejudging others, secrets not really mattering, and how something can be sensationalized so quickly for that 15 minutes of fame because of a shock factor. You should watch her video. It's pretty entertaining, I must say. Some other things that really remind me of this stuff was things that I used to watch when I was younger, like Real World, Road Rules, Double Dare, Fear Factor, American Idol, where people would purposely embarrass themselves for a little bit of money and a little bit of fame. People still do that. Wipeout's a great one where they do that. My parents are laughing so hard when we were watching that, and people know that they're just going to flop around in the water and it's going to be hard and they're going to make a fool of themselves, but they have a chance to win $10,000 and appear on TV. So people sign up for this shit. By the way, let me know in the comments below if you knew where that "shut up and take my money" came from, or when you watched this episode, if you were like, oh, that's where this meme comes from. I'd love to know. But anyways, these are essentially my initial thoughts, my initial connections for analysis that I have when I watch this. It's not organized in any particular way other than trying to get under theme. This is not the way I would organize my essay. We will talk about that when we talk about the Toolman terms. So, ask questions in the email or the comments, start conversations, add things that I missed that you saw. I'd love to know. Everybody always notices something. So, I'll see you guys next class.